Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome back, everyone. So, as you know, we've been doing a series according to the beginning of the conversation, a community forum hosted by and presented by the Surrey Hospice Society. And here's the last talk that we've recorded in this particular series at this event, and we want to again thank you, Surrey Hospice, for inviting us to come and record the event and be a part of it. It was a great honor and a great responsibility. So finally, we're getting to wills and estates, and I know it seems while people. A lot of you out there are maybe on disability or something like that, and you think, I don't have anything to leave to anyone else. Well, wills and estates aren't necessarily just about what you have. It's how you want things, also about how you want things to be handled, and the details surrounding what's going to be left behind for loved ones, the memories and all that sort of stuff that are going to be left behind for loved ones after we have gone. And so this next talk is from Elyssa Lockhart. She practices in a corporate and wealth preservation department at McCreary Hunter LLP. Called to the British Columbia Bar in February of 2001, Elyssa completed her articles and then practiced with a well-respected mid-size downtown Vancouver firm. Elyssa is now part of a partner at McCreary Hunter LLP. She sees clients in her Surrey office as well as in her own in-office and mission. In her corporate practice, Elyssa primarily assists owners, operators with the structure of governance issues associated with incorporation, sale, and acquisition of corporate assets, and corporations themselves, successions with planning, transition of ownership, as well as wind up in dissolution. Elyssa is also well versed in corporate reorganizations, as well as works with clients and accountants and other advisors in the estate freeze or other transactions designed to minimize undesirable tax conquests while maximizing tax benefits outcomes. Elyssa has chosen to adopt a collaborative and interdisciplinary approach to her estate planning and estate administration practices, regularly consulting with financial planners, accountants, business managers, and other professionals as necessary to ensure clients' wishes are able to be carried out following their passing. Elyssa practices family enterprise clients involved in farming, manufacturing, real estate development, and other industries. She has significant experience in drafting estate plans for blended families and for families wishing to protect interests of disabled beneficiaries. She advises estate representatives as well as beneficiaries during probate application process and provides on the interpretation of wills, trusts, and other estate planning documents. Along with this, Elyssa will say in her talk that she also has someone in her family that has a disability, and how she wishes to protect that person. So, with all that being said, there's a lot of mouthful of reading here. Let's get on with her talk, and we'll be back after it's done. Okay?
Just for my client, this is Elyssa Lockhart, and she will be talking about your will. No way. So today, as usual, everybody's very excited about talking about taxes. I always draw a bunch of crowds, so come right in. I'll try to make it painless and maybe a little bit brief towards the end of the day. The presentation is very lawyer-like and longer than 45 minutes. I won't speak for 45 minutes in any event, so I'm going to skip through a bunch of it. I always usually start with a chat about why I talk about planning so much, and it's usually because the best laid plans are nice and men. So I was going to talk about last week's snowstorm, the very, very, very bad day when nobody came to the office, everywhere was closed. I ended up going to the hospital for a family that had sudden experience and had already entered into sale of their home, and the sale was closing, and they didn't have a power of attorney, and they didn't have a will, and they didn't have this, they didn't have that, and then all of a sudden a major health incident takes place. But I won't tell you too much about that, because actually I wasn't supposed to be the individual speaking to today in this time slot. On Wednesday evening, when I said, okay, somebody's had a change in plans, something sudden and unexpected come up, I don't have anything planned on Saturday except to get my nails done. Still looks like Christmas all up in here. Really, really Christmassy. I thought that I had the day free. And then between Wednesday at 7 o'clock at night and this morning, we ended up having a family funeral scheduled for 11 o'clock today. So I don't know if I said this on the weekend. And I will go back afterwards. I did manage to go. But these are the things that make planning so important. And it's why I spend my time talking to groups. And I prefer, to be frank, groups. So that we get a little bit deeper into the information. So I'm going to start, but anything that I say, if you have a question about it, interrupt me and ask, because we are small enough that we can do that. You're going to tell me a bit of a story and then ask a question, and we'll do that at the end, because that'll maybe come with information that I have. So I actually never do stand right under my presentation. I usually try and read a little bit of it so I know I'm not jumping ahead. Basically, we just want to make planning clear so that our wishes are followed. I think that everybody is, maybe I should I bring the mic down? I think I'm okay. Are we good for hearing here? Yeah, we're okay, excellent. So the reason that we want to do planning, obviously, is to ensure our wishes are followed. So let's keep going with boring stuff. Why do we make an estate plan? Obvious. But we also want to reduce tax, right? We want to reduce the cost of transmission of assets. Tax isn't the only thing that happens when we pass away. And then we want to avoid disputes. If we aren't clear about our wishes, some people assume they know our wishes, some people have their own wishes that they wish to impose. And we also want to calculate what we have, how we're going to transition it, and make sure that if we have specific concerns about people that we're leaving behind, or pets, that we've made plans for their financial future. So a lot of times people will do this, and they'll say, I've got a power of attorney, that's awesome, I've got a representation agreement, healthcare authorization, committee nominee in place, and I've got a last will and testament. When I am at work, and the next list is not exclusively estate planning, some of these documents can be used for other purposes, but it's also not exhaustive. So estate planning for me looks more like, I have 2 slides today, I've only included one, so it's a really big list when I start talking about What does it take to move assets from here to wherever I want it to go in the future? And it always depends on what kind of assets we have. So when we talk about estates and someone has passed and we talk about this thing called probate, and what does probate mean and how long does it take and how expensive is it? What's interesting about probate to me as a lawyer that we don't talk about a lot is that, and my paralegal often says she really likes my watch because it does so much. It's one of those Apple watches. If I died at my desk, she says, she'd come in and take it. It's not probatable, so okay. It's that, but not probatable. So what is probatable? And so we look at, some people think if it's under $25,000 in value, if it's under $50,000 in value, if it's got a designated beneficiary named on it, if it's jointly owned, sure. But in British Columbia, we have the Business Corporations Act. If it's a privately held corporate share, that statute says it doesn't necessarily have to be probatable. So we have a structure if we don't want it to be. If we have a vehicle and our entire estate is under $25,000, including the vehicle can be transferred without probate. A lot of times we get confused. We think if the vehicle's under $25,000, we can transfer it. When we have land, all land, if you're the sole owner of any interest registered on land in BC, land is probatable. So 2 years ago, I probated an estate worth $1.76. It was an awful experience for the family because I didn't charge only $1.76. It takes a lot of challenge to work with a family that's going through a difficult situation. And they find out that dad owned $100,000 of his son's property. Because they thought, when they asked the notary to do that, that would prevent somebody else from coming and stealing the title, or they thought that it would give dad control of the property instead of the ex-wife if the son passed away. So we have these things in our minds as lay people that may or may not work for our planning. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is what's a good idea, what's not a great idea, might be one for one person and totally the opposite for another. But these are kind of some options that we will think about as estate planning documents in the future when we see them. So most of my practice is complex estates. I have associates who do this simple husband and wife nuclear family back-to-back estates. I work a lot with corporate assets. My practice is mostly wealth preservation. So how does somebody who's built up a lot of wealth preserve that on their death, on their transition, on their retirement? I work a lot with private companies and tax planning, but I do a lot of work with blended families as well. One of my children is disabled, and I do a lot of registered disability work as well, but not as much as some of my colleagues, and a lot of that I do refer out. If anybody has specific questions about that, there's a lot of people who specifically practice solely in that area that are exceptional for very unique situations. And I also deal with foreign assets, but one of my tax associates deals with most of those for me because I can only absorb one income tax act. She apparently has several in her mind. So, blended families, I want to talk about them because even if you're not in one, they're more and more prevalent. And when we talk about our estate plans, our friends think that they might be a good idea for them. We might be talking to a friend who has a child who's in a blended family, things like that. I deal with a lot of people who are in their 70s, 80s, who enter into blended situations at that age. So it's not uncommon as our health continues to be strong into our retirement that we recouple after the death of a partner. It can be tragic and devastating to an estate plan if we treat our blended families the way we treat our nuclear families. So traditional planning doesn't work. Under our statute, if we say I want my children, then I'm only referring to my natural or my adopted children. I'm not referring to my stepchildren. Unless I contain a definition in my document that specifically names them and says these are also in the definition of children, which we can do, but we have to do it intentionally. Simple wills generally look like complex estates to me. A lot of times people say, whoa, 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 I just want something really simple. And I say, fabulous. Okay, so I've got the precedent document here. I can print it out. We call it CLE, Continuing Legal Education. The CLE Society of British Columbia gives training to lawyers and notaries. Lawyers are required either to sit in a classroom like this and listen to somebody like me, or stand in a classroom like this and speak to lawyers and notaries 12 hours a year. So we have CLE precedent documents. Our most basic documents are for the nuclear family or the people who are not lawfully entitled to draft certain clauses into an estate plan. But those simple wills typically cause complicated estates. If I use something that's suitable for a nuclear family with no corporate assets and no tax issues on death for somebody who has all of those complications, then their estate will be convoluted and expensive, comparatively speaking, and possibly result in the challenges that we see in relationships after death, right? So when I ask a client what side they want something to be simple on, today's document, on something that's 4 pages, that's okay, no problem. Do you mind if it takes 5 years of litigation after you die? Because it's really not going to cover all the answers to all the questions. It sounds like one of your family members or one of your business partners isn't really the agreeable sort. They always answer with, no, I need simple because when I die, I want nobody to have to worry about the details. I want it all to be clear. So that's where go to somebody who does something similar to what I do, and almost exclusively. We shouldn't be seeking out advice from people who had this happen once and they did this. And we shouldn't seek advice from people who have a litany of things they're really good at and they also do wills. Right? So we should be asking people who have specific questions who know the specific answer, because we want the simplest will for the simple estate administration process, not necessarily that CLE precedent, quote unquote, simple. So clients do come in and they say, I just want to go from A to B. A to B, straight line, I get it. I want to do that when I seek a lawyer's advice as well. I go to my accountant. Can you just make it simple, A to B? I don't always understand the math, right? But the problem with A to B is it might create a cost on transition. It might create an argument between the family that's unnecessary. I'm not interested in changing your B. No lawyer is interested in changing your B. B is fabulous because it belongs to you. It's your goal. Right? My goals are different. They're my objective opinion from a lawyer's perspective. Your goal is that it's good for you. You wouldn't have come up with it if it wasn't. My practical opinion is, what if we got to be differently than you come in and conceive of it and made the outcome more positive for everybody involved? So when I look at that, that's a challenge, because lawyers traditionally, my father was an estate planning professional for 31 years before he passed 15 years ago. And I saw him, growing up, I saw him all the time sit down and say, so what do you want to do when? And it didn't really matter whether it was an estate plan or whether it was a subdivision or an incorporation. What do you want to do? I want to hear your goals, but I want to ask you that after I get to know you, because nobody comes to a lawyer for anything other than our opinion. Lawyer's advice, legal advice. So yeah, anybody can write the document if they know all the options. So when you talk with your lawyer, make sure that they know who's in your family that doesn't necessarily look traditionally like family. What assets do you have? How do you hold them right now? Who are the designated beneficiaries or who are the intended? What's the genesis of some of this money? When was the last time you triggered your capital gain on that investment account? So somebody should be asking these questions. You might not know the answers, that's okay. That's why email was invented, so that lawyers and planners could talk with one another after the meeting. So there's not a lot of understanding of the implications on the asset transfer cost or the tax cost or the legal entitlements that you need to bring to an interview. You're going to know the answers to the questions the lawyer asks you because it's the best quiz you'll ever take. It's all about you. You're the center of attention and you already know these answers. But in my thought, I'm just going to put my daughter on joint with my property. My mother, married to my dad for 31 years. He's practicing the whole time they're together. Then he passes away. She turns to me and says, and she worked in his office, I should say, "You should go on title to my husband." Well, no, I shouldn't. Because if you recouple and I don't like him, what are the chances I'm going to let you sell the house? Right. What if my husband, who's my third, and I think third time lucky, but what if my husband turns out yet again not to be the right choice? And he says, "I want half of all the assets that are in your name, and that's a nice looking house." We have lawyers for that too, if they're more expensive than us. And then worst, but if she dies after a rise in the property value, I don't live with my mom, I'm 50. I have my own house, I have my own young children, and she's entitled to the rise in value because she gets a capital gain exemption on 100% of that gain. But I'm not. On paper, that asset looks like an investment asset. So if I go on title and then she lives 10 years, how do I deal with that capital gain in my hands? And why would I pay capital gains on an asset that I could have just let fall into her estate and pay 1.4% in the probate of it? So 1.4% is the probate rate in BC. It's not the lowest in the country. It's certainly not the highest. But it's probably number 3 in the country. It's not cheap. But on the other hand, I'm really short. You can't tell that I've had a loan removed. And I'm not a runner. But I can promise you that if somebody at the back door said, "Here's a magic ticket that says that you get to pay 1.4% tax on everything else for the rest of your life, only one of them available," I would take all of you to the back door because it's a fabulous tax rate. You have to be dead at the moment in order to get it, but it's still not a bad tax rate compared to our other tax rates that we pay. So when we avoid probate for the sake of avoiding probate, and not for the sake of how do we want the asset to flow, where do we actually want it to end up, what are the best transfer costs that we are going to achieve, we sometimes make these mistakes where we can end up paying tens of thousands of dollars more because we did this little thing that we thought would be easier for people. So that's the A to B for me. This is a blended family. This is actually my family, I'll be honest. So she's now just about 19. She met parent number 2 when she was 3, and she calls him Dad. So I think she's safe in his heart, and I know she is. But I don't know if she's safe in the heart of his second wife. But now, I don't think he's met her yet because I'm still here. I hope he hasn't met her yet. But if I pass away, I know, right? We all hope that. But if I pass away, 20 years from now, he's recoupled, I do not think his wife is going to turn to him and say, "Lenny, what do you want to do with Alyssa's money when we die?" It's going to be their money. And she might have kids, and they might have kids together. So this is why we have to be thinking about our estate plans if we have children who have had more than one marriage, or if we have children whose spouses bring a child of another marriage in. So here, when I mirror my estate plan, my will says everything to my husband, and his says everything to me. And then our will say, after the death of the last of us, everything equally among our 3 girls. That's great unless one of us changes our will after the first dies. I'm unlikely to because I'm an estate planner. I know where I've accumulated my wealth. I would probably do other documents if I recoupled, but I still only have 3 children, 1 woman, 3 children. On the other hand, my husband has 2 children and a stepchild who's already away at university, living away. He would never have the opportunity to be parenting her with a recoupled second wife. So that relationship might not gel the same way. And he changed his will. She wouldn't have necessarily the same interest in flowing assets down to his 3 children as to his 2. There is something we can do about that. We can still do this in our will, but we have to make it into a contract that we don't change our will after the death of the first. That's possible. I don't like to do it for people as young as I am because I might, recouple another couple of times. We don't know. I might change my mind. My children are very young. One of them might actually turn out to be very, very wealthy, very intelligent. So far they're looking okay, but not Stephen Hawking. But maybe they don't need my money. Maybe at the end of my life after the death of my spouse, my middle child doesn't actually require anything, but my younger child requires a lot of support. Her life has just turned out more difficult. So I might want to change my dispositive provisions long after my husband passes away, because we're very young, anything can happen. Kind of like the Wednesday to this morning thing, right? So I like to do those mutual wills, as we call them, the contract, where we know we're a blended family, and here's what we're going to do. I want to leave you enough to support you because we're sharing our wealth, and we've got this home or we've got this lifestyle. But afterwards, I need to know that the assets will still flow down the way we've talked about. And it doesn't have to be equally between the two families. It doesn't have to be equally between all of the children. It could be 60-40, as long as both of your wills don't get changed afterwards because of this contract. So if we're older, we can talk about that. A lot of lawyers don't talk about that. Many aren't aware that that's possible. There's a lot of case law about it. It does work. There's some challenges, though. Or we could segregate assets. We could do life interests, life insurance, statutory declarations, even gift things during our life. All of these things are a little bit easier to imagine working in operation. So if you have questions about that, you bring them up with your lawyer. Your lawyer is going to be able to say, oh yeah, so here's a good example, there's a good example. These are all things that we do on a daily basis because we've got so many blended families now. So probably avoidance for the sake of it, though. We can do pre-gifting. I know a lot of clients that want to gift, I just sold my home, I've downsized into a condo, I want to put $300,000 into each of my, children's accounts, and I'm going to keep $100,000. So say we've sold one of those properties that went crazy high, and now we've got $1 million, right? If we give, let's say it's 150, and I'm going to pull 100, I've got one condo. What if I need more? How do I get it back? How do I get it back if I put it in the name of a child, and the child has blended it with their spouse's assets, and their spouse now is departing? If you're not done with it, don't give it up. There's lots of things we can do to help our children. We can enter into agreements with our children. We can lend money to children, and then in the will, we can do certain things. If we do want to give a gift to a child, but not all of our children, because all of our children don't need it, maybe we don't have as much money, I might pre-gift to one of my 3 girls, and then I would use a word called hotchpot in the will. And hotchpot means that I take, say I have a $3 million estate, math is not my forte, so I always do things in threes, $3 million estate, and all of my daughters think they're getting $1 million when I die. One of them uses $300,000 of my money over the course of 8 years to go to university. So how do we accommodate for the other 2 not having done that? Some people will say, well, she should give 150 to her older sister and 150 to her younger sister. Okay, so then the oldest and the youngest get 1.15 and she gets 7. It doesn't seem right. So then we think about it, what is this hodgepodge concept? It's way easier than all of this different kind of math that people bring to me. I added 300 to my 3 million. I pretend she paid me back the day before I died. Now I have 3.3. I know, and it's conceptual. I know you can't dole out checks. That's kiting, right? Different area of law. So if I have 3.3, they would each get 1.1. And if we pay out of my 3 million, 1.1 to the oldest and the youngest, then we're going to have 800 left. Because conceptually, if you owed me 300,000, That would be a debt collected by my estate. And where does my estate go? Equally between my 3 girls. So when we lend money to children, I see a lot of conflict after people pass, because the family doesn't realize that that debt, when it is paid back, the child still gets their proportionate share of that gift. Right? They don't owe it to their siblings. They don't owe it to the other family members. They owe it to mom or dad. And mom or dad says they get a proportionate share of the estate. Once it's in the estate, they should get that quarter or that third or that half back. So that's a really simple thing that I see probably every month conflict with. And it's just math. It's just conceptualizing whose money is it after mom dies. Well, it's still mom's. You know, in our house, everything's mine. Don't touch that, right? So when we give it back, we dole it out, and then we all get equal treatment. And so whether or not our will says equal treatment, say I give 50% to my oldest daughter, and then I give 25 and 25. It's all proportional in that example, so we can still do the hodgepodge. Something that a lot of people don't think about. But pre-gifting can cause a lot of conflict. Joint ownership, we've already talked about the problem on joint ownership with your principal residence. Joint ownership on bank accounts, a lot of people say, well, I did that so that they could access money when I can't get there. Okay, well, we have powers of attorney for that. I think I'm a trustworthy child. I'm an only child, so heaven help my mother if I'm not, because she doesn't have any other options for all of the emotional support that we give to one another as we get older. But when we look at that trustworthiness, does it still mean that you would want to share legal ownership of your assets with somebody? Or do you want them to be a trustee for you? Do you want them to access your money for your benefit, knowing that there's checks and balances that protect you, but also them? So a lot of times people aren't only children. I still only want to be a power of attorney for my mother. There's a lot of things. I have a very close friend who went on as power of attorney for her mother, signed the document, took responsibility, but mom didn't need her help. Mom was absolutely competent to make decisions. She did a lot of crazy things with her money, and it was so cool to watch. She was like the most amazing woman. But at the end of things, the other family members started asking, well, weren't you watching when she did these crazy things? And she said, hell yeah, I watched my entire life. Where were you? But what's the stage where you want to step up and say, that's actually not a sensible thing. That's actually not in your best interest, right? Because crazy stuff I do every day just to make Wednesday more fun. But competent is something that's really important when we're using these documents. And I think that it's better when we don't invoke the power of attorney that's been given to us until we need to use it. So it's also really important not to go untitled to somebody's account, because then there's a question. Mom went in and took out $5,000 and there's nothing bought to show for it. Maybe it was you. So siblings don't have the same level of trust often that parents do. So the reason that I am so concerned about that, and I know everybody comes to me and says, never in my family, and I'm confident that that's 99% of the time going to be true. I haven't met most of my clients' families. I have met a lot of other families. So when we think about the chances that your family is one of the other families I might meet, nobody wants to meet me. I'm not that fun. Death and taxes again. I'm a one-trick pony, like I said, right? So it's got to be either you're planning, you're building something, you're protecting an asset, or it's got to be something really bad has happened. There's only 2 ways to meet somebody like myself. So we don't think that we're the best when we're under stress or when we're experiencing grief. We don't think that others are. But when we are experiencing that grief and that stress, we don't stop to think about that. And we can say things or we can imply things that others have said that will never, ever leave our minds or our memories. And that becomes our family experience. So the goal here in looking at all of these things that I say as the specter of doom is imagine how I would feel if I could look down and see that I had created that situation that I never expected to see in my 3 children. But I do think I could see it in my kids, because every morning I come down the stairs and I say, shh, leave your sister alone. First argument they have after I die is the first argument I can't say, just shh. And then sometimes stronger language, which they were going to get it from TV anyway, right? But we can move assets outside of our probatable estate safely. I might move an asset that will have to have a transfer fee attached to it or a tax attached to it anyway into the hands of another person, and then I get them to sign a bare trust agreement saying that their legal title carries no benefit, that they are holding it on trust, and their part means it's bare legal. It means absolutely no personal benefit. Until a later date when they may be one of the individuals that they're holding it in trust for. During my life, they'll hold it for me. After my death, they'll hold it for my beneficiaries, or one beneficiary, or a charity. Multiple will strategy is specifically for corporate assets. If anybody has somebody that they care about that has maybe $1.5 million or more in privately held corporate shares, then I can answer questions about that, but it's not really the group today. A lot of the time this presentation is given to accountants for talking to their clients. But we are able, like I said earlier, to use the Business Corporations Act to take companies directly out of our estate plan. Family trusts and alter ego trusts, if you're lucky enough to be over age 65, then you can have an alter ego trust or a joint partner trust, which is a really, really good vehicle if you expect to have a challenge to your will. So you're disinheriting a child. You have a child who has succumbed to some form of lifestyle that you're not in support of, or that is not good for them. Or you have a child that's a spendthrift. I don't know, my mom might have one of those kinds of trusts because of me. She thinks I go to the mall too much. But if we have a spendthrift child, then we can say the trust will dole it out. Now, in a will, what we often will see is that people will challenge that. So we have in British Columbia, unlike other provinces, the will's variation provisions that say that if a child feels that your division or your treatment of them in will is not fair, just, or adequate, they can apply to the court to modify those provisions. Other provinces, your will is your will is your will your way. Here we do things a little bit differently. Again, with the A to B. If B is, I want to get rid of this child in my will, this is a relationship that through my best efforts could not be salvaged, we can do that. You don't have to give somebody something just because they're a spouse or a child. A lot of the time I hear, I heard I had to give them at least $10 and then that protected me. No. Have you ever seen a caged tiger that when someone walked up and poked it, it felt better? Don't poke the caged tiger. That's what will cause a lawsuit. You might give something to a child outside a will. You might explain to the child that you don't need anything, your siblings do. You might say, we just haven't had this relationship. But please don't ever poke somebody with $1 or $10 or $100. It's hurtful in a way that you'll never be able to pull back. And it isn't a legal thing. It never was a legal thing. I don't know where that one ever started, but I see these wills frequently. So there is a way within your will to leave somebody less than or even nothing, but it isn't to say, here's your Louis. Alter ego trusts are great. If you're under age 65, family trusts are great too. They're more expensive to maintain. They don't have quite the longevity. Alter ego trusts go till death, so it's good longevity. But the family trusts, we have the Income Tax Act saying that we have to refresh every 21 years. So there's a deemed disposition for tax purposes of all the assets in those vehicles. That's a bit deep for this afternoon. You guys have already been listening to people talk all afternoon. So if you have real questions about that, ask me later. That's just sort of a basic, what are they? But I get that I'm talking a lot about probate avoidance because it's really what people are trying to do all the time. So we want to avoid delay. We think probate takes forever, and it isn't really the act of probating something that takes forever. So if I am power of attorney for my mother before she passes away, and I'm printing out her monthly bank statements every month, and I'm in constant contact with her financial advisor, and I can have easy access to her date of death balances, and I know all of her assets. What's the value of her vehicle? Well, I can do a Black Book or a Kelly Book search on the internet for that. What's the value of her home? I can use, if I want, and it's again a strategy question, it's a tax question, do I want to use this year's assessment value, or do I want to get a market value? And the assessment value is lower. Everybody wants to use the assessment value. But 3 years ago, we had a rising market. Like, people would call me and say, what do you think my house is worth? And I said, well, half an hour ago, I would have known the answer, but now, anybody's game, right? So when we have this rising market, if we assess something at a particular value in an estate for probate purposes, and it rises, and then we say, oh, well, Cousin Joe was living with her, he fell on hard times, let's let him stay there for a year, and he says, just another 3 months. We only have a particular amount of time after someone dies to obtain that capital gain exemption. And if we extend the ownership in the estate past that time period, then we end up with the estate owing a capital gain. So going with the lowest common denominator value on that initial statement to the probate registry might actually not be the way to go in a rising market. We want to be as clear about the market value as possible so that we don't trigger something that costs more than that 1.4%. So there's a lot of things we want to think about when we're looking at that. But probate delay, if you know all of that information, then we send a notice to everybody who's entitled to notice under the statute. We have to wait 23 days after that. And anyone who's read the statute is saying, she doesn't know what she's talking about, it's 21 days. But lawyers, when we say 21 days, we mean 23 days. Clear days. You don't count the day you send the notice, and you don't count the last day of the count. So 23 days later, we can submit to a registry. Lots of people, realtors, I talk to realtors all the time, I give this presentation to realtors, they'll say, you have to use the US registry because it's the biggest land title registry and they know the most about land. They don't know anything more about land in the probate registry than they do in Chilliwack or Victoria or Vancouver. Land is land. It's been around for a really long time. All of the registries are all there. So we don't have to go through US just for land. In fact, land is the slowest registry in my experience for probates. So I use Chilliwack. Not a big secret among the legal clan. Chilliwack is usually faster. Right now they're about 3 or 4 weeks. A couple of years ago they were about 3 or 4 days. Back in 2008, different statutory process. They were 9 months for that. So yes, there's a reason people talk about delay, but it isn't applicable right now. It isn't. So when we look at 3 months, that's where we're headed to right now because we've had a change in staff at the registry. People will talk about that, but it isn't this whole year. We talk about an executor's year, that's a very different thing we're talking about. Avoiding probate fees, I've covered that. Distancing assets from those variation claims. Well, if I jointure an asset with one of my children, and I don't paper what the jointure is for, there is a presumption at law that if an adult transfers an asset to an adult child of theirs, with no consideration, which means no payment, the presumption is it was for estate planning purposes only, and it's not a gift. It was to avoid probate. The presumption is it belongs to my estate after my death. So if you've got a couple of kids and one is living with you and taking care of you, and you put that child on jointly with your property, the presumption of law is that that child is a bare trustee, which is why I talk about bare trustee before I get to this slide. So if you are a child caring for a parent and you have taken jointure in a property, that presumption will operate to allow a sibling or another claimant to come along and say, no, that was really mom's property. She was just avoiding probate. So these are all the things that I want to leave you with as far as why wouldn't I just download that will? Or, and I want to be really clear before I say this, because the wills kit books, there's a lot of them, and I don't like them. I always say I don't like them. I don't discourage you from buying them because my name's on one of them. The last offer retired and somebody else had to take over the job. So that's fine. 3 easy steps, right? But don't write your own will. Know as much as you can before you sit down with your family. Know as much as you can about why do I want to do this or that with my assets. You don't have to buy that book. You can look on the internet. Look in BC, because BC is different than Alabama. So there's a lot of things that when you find it on the internet doesn't really apply here. So it isn't helpful to understand how that law works. But here, what we want to do is we want to be looking at why we try to avoid probate. When we're writing our wills, we need to say why we're transferring assets the way we're transferring things. We also try to avoid probate for avoiding public access to our information. Everybody wants to keep their company values private when they pass away. Pardon me just a second. I got tagged to speak at the funeral this morning, so I've been speaking for hours already today. Avoiding public access to valuation is more important in companies to a lot of private families. But when we're just dealing with our private assets, our home, our bank accounts, if we do have kind of a nosy sibling, or if we do have somebody who's always trying to get their fingers in every pie and, oh, did you know what so-and-so got, and did you know this and that? Everything we file with the probate registry is a public record. Any one of us can search it. So, once you've told somebody on a probate application what your home is worth, what your bank account contained, what your assets that didn't have a designated beneficiary named on them were worth, all of that can be pulled up by somebody who wasn't included in the will but thought they should be. All of it can be pulled up by your ex-husband. Mine wouldn't. They're lawyers too, so they don't care. But a lot of people think that these are really big pieces of information, and we want to know, what did this child get? And what about mother-in-laws and father-in-laws? So we think that our children might be having some strife, and what did they receive? The Family Law Act in British Columbia says you don't have to share an inheritance with your spouse. So if you inherit $1 million and then you get divorced, what do you do with $1 million? You keep it. You don't split it. You split the gain on any investment you might put in during the rest of the marriage. But this public access means somebody else might know how much you got from that estate. So there's a whole bunch of reasons to avoid probate, but you have to do it the right way. You have to know that you're not causing yourself some deleterious consequence. I've already talked about it. Apparently this is my favorite subject, because all of this I've just been spending half an hour talking about, but we don't want to create capital gain. We don't want me making decisions about whether my mom can buy a house with a boyfriend. I would say no, my dad's only been gone for 15 years. I'm not quite there yet. But access by creditors is really interesting. I did pull out most of the case references for today, so you didn't get too bored with all this case law. But Gully versus Gully is really interesting. This was a mom who put her son on title to her property without telling him. He didn't have a clue. She never told him he was joint on her property. He had a company, and he could not pay the bills through the company, and one of his creditors sued his company, and then through that sued him. He owed money to this creditor, and it was a big one. And that creditor went to court and got an order to charge the debt against the title to the mother's house because her son was on it. So not as surprising as you might think, because I've already said, don't put it in somebody's name if they have a spouse that's going to claim, if they have a creditor that's going to claim. But the key point about this one that was super interesting to lawyers was the son didn't even know. How could he have had a beneficial interest during her lifetime in an asset he didn't know about? Clearly, it's mine. I don't even want you to know you own it. I'm paying all the bills. Nothing's going to you. You're not helping me with the taxes. But when I die, I've done you this big favor that you won't ever have to go through probate on it. It was a surprise for him that he didn't have to see a lawyer. Lots of people consider that a gift, but it's not such a gift because now she doesn't have much of her equity in her own life. So I just want to say that is actually a real thing. It's very current and it's easy. Estate disputes, yeah, that's because we don't actually pay for them. We put somebody's name on something and we don't actually do, this is a gift. This is our money during lifetime. Minor beneficiaries, disabled beneficiaries, we don't want people who are legally not competent to manage their own assets to be the owners of assets without a named trustee. What happens if I have an asset that I leave to my grandchildren, actually not to my children, they're still minors, I leave these assets to my children and the public guardian and trustee says, oh, because they were joined, they flowed directly as a child, there's no trustee relationship, we will manage their money. And what happens when the public guardian and trustee is managing money for a minor? They get it all on their 19th birthday. So if your estate's worth $100,000, if your estate's worth $1 million, it doesn't matter. Do you think that's a good number for a 19-year-old who just lost a parent? Personally, I don't. But again, your A to B is not my A to B. The A and how to get to B, that's me. But your B can be, yeah, I think that my 19-year-old is going to be really, really grounded, especially after my death. They're going to hunker down and really make good decisions. And that $3 million is good for them. And I'm going to have had a couple of clients in the last 20 years say that to me, but not very many. Varying investment time horizons. This is really, really important to me because I see it all the time. Parents will leave properties to children instead of leaving the residue to the children. Well, they can sell it when they want. Okay, so I do have a half-brother from my biological father. The father that passed away was my dad that raised me. But I have this other brother out there, half-brother. He's a nice guy. We know each other now. He's 13 and a half years younger than me. We have very dissimilar upbringings and we have very dissimilar play styles right now. He hasn't quite decided what he wants to do when he grows up. Telling him that at 35, kind of. But his wife is in her master's program. She wants to do a PhD. They've just bought their first home and they've just had their second baby. If our biological father left his beautiful waterfront home in Ladysmith to us, instead of the residue of the sale, what would happen? My brother would say, wow, okay, so when we sell it, that's it, we sell it. No, I'm at a stage in my life where I want a weekend home in Ladysmith. I like the view. I like the jam. I like the art, right? I mean, everything there is nice. He doesn't want that. He's going to say, well, then you buy me out. I say, oh, I don't have that much money. No, I can't buy you out. But I'll loan you some money for the property taxes. He actually needs that money to improve his current life, to get to where I am with a house and investments. He wants that, and that's where he will get it. But I'm impeding him. So now I've created this argument. Now it doesn't matter that he's a half-brother and I don't know him well. Imagine now that it's your family. So I've got my oldest daughter who's just about 19. I've got my youngest daughter who's 10. Do I want to create that kind of tension? She's being awful. You're being obstructive. I mean, I hear those words in my home every day, but I don't want it to be heard over legitimate arguments that I can't be here to fix. So the varying investment time horizons, it's a bunch of words that don't really make sense for what I'm talking about, but what I'm talking about I think is really important that people understand. If an asset is supposed to be shared, it has to be shared between people who can share the asset the way it is. So a gift in kind works if those people have those same ideas, same timelines. My husband and I buy property together because we have the same retirement plan. Our children will need college money at the same time, wedding money at the same time. But I don't buy property with people who I don't have an agreement when I'm going to sell it. or what would constitute a good reason to sell it before the agreed upon time. Here, you're creating a contractual agreement, a partnership, without someone else's consent, and those people are your loved ones. So I just think it's a hazard. Designating beneficiaries. We do have some tax consequences on death to some of those assets in the first line. Death of a beneficiary is an issue and blended family gifting. So if I leave my RRSP to my son because I've got $400,000 in RRSP and and I leave my cabin to my daughter, then I might see that there's a gain on both of them. But if I have a $400,000 condo and I leave that to my daughter and I leave the $400,000 RRSP to my son because my husband is predeceased, there is a tax consequence on my RRSP and not on my condo. So the gift to the son needs to be almost halved because $400,000 cashing out your RRSP on your day of death will result in a tax bill. It gets attributed to your income. How much tax do we think we pay on $400,000? Just under 50%. Because most of us in Canada don't earn anywhere near $400,000 a year. We don't want our death to be our highest earning year. But if it is, we want to make sure, again, the condo and the RRSP should flow so that the residue is split equally between the kids. I keep saying that because it's the assumption that probably 80% of my clients make, that everything will be equalized, but it's not a moral judgment. So when I say it, 50-50 could equally be 20-80, 60-40, apply your own numbers. But when we roll assets, we have to know those designated beneficiaries, are they actually helping our plan, or are they creating a problem of inequity that we didn't expect? When I look down to, so that's the tax consequence of it, death of the beneficiary. My will says, everything to this person and everything to that person, and then everything flows to the children. Most of the time when I'm writing it, most clients, even though I deal with the complex questions, still want to move assets between spouses and then down through their children equally. So what happens if I say, in my will, my husband, let's just assume he's deceased. He dies a lot in my examples. That's fun for me and my mother dies. But so my husband dies, and my 3 children are there. And now they're adults, and they all have children of their own. So I know I have tax consequences on my RRSP, but I leave it designated to all 3 of them. One of them dies. And now what happens to my equalization plan? When I die, my RRSP goes to the surviving beneficiaries because that's what that contract looks like at the bank or the investment platform that I'm using for my RRSP. So I need to put something in my will that says, in the event that one of my designated beneficiaries passes away and doesn't take their third of that $400,000, hodgepodge it in the will. So we get a lot of use out of this really old word that even a lot of lawyers don't know what it means. But I really like to do that because if it is a significant asset in your estate, and if somebody is intended to take and accidentally doesn't, the others are unjustly enriched, or not really unjustly, that's a technical legal term. They're unduly enriched by the death of their sibling. And the children of that sibling probably would have benefited from the inheritance. They probably were expecting that their parent was still going to keep working and earning money. Now you've got young grandchildren who don't have the benefit of that money. So if it was your plan to flow through the generations for that purpose, we can fix that in the will without changing the beneficiary designation. We can fix it so that we don't have to pay probate fees on the RRSP. Can't get away from CRA, but you can get away from probate fees. But you want to make sure that you're protecting against the unexpected in your will. So there's no flow through on that RRSP designation, but we can work with the math in the will. Blended family gifting, so I do have a blended family. So I might say I have a big TFSA. I've invested the maximum every year, and I've invested wisely and it's grown. And I want to leave that to her. Because in the event that she takes it, and then later her father actually does share equally between the 3 girls, he can have a hodgepodge of what she received from my TFSA outside of the will. But if he doesn't, she got something. So I can do that with my RRSP, I can do that with life insurance. So I might have a life insurance policy that will deal with some of the mortgage, deal with some of the expenses, and then I parse it in half and I leave it to my oldest daughter and I say, this changes his estate plan. So a lot of times blended families will go to different lawyers, and it's because there's potentially a conflict of interest. But we want to still be communicated. Even if we're getting separate advice, we want to be going to people of the same level of planning knowledge. We don't want one person saying, well, he wants to go to a big fancy lawyer and I just want to download this from the internet. Those plans can't mesh. They can't work properly to protect all of the kids. So those are what I think of designated beneficiaries. Great opportunity to avoid some costs, but it can create others if we're not careful. I'm going to skip through multiple wills because it's not as interesting as intestacy. This is what happens to a lot of people in Canada. I think almost 50% of us still don't have wills. It used to be 52%, and I thought, well, 52% of the population is women. That doesn't make sense. Women are always so organized. So how do we figure out who these people are that don't have wills? Some of them are incredibly wealthy, some are incredibly sophisticated, some of them are unsophisticated, some of them say, I don't have two diamonds to rub together, so I don't need one. Really, there's no telling why a person doesn't have a will other than they put it off. They have other things to do. They think that I'm really boring. They think that I'm going to talk about death and that they're going to cry. There's a lot of reasons. The thing that I put off in my life is my nails, my Christmas nails. Because this was more important than doing that this afternoon. And then the funeral was more important than doing it this morning. So we should be thinking about what we're putting off. If this is what we're putting off, think about how many changes might have happened in everybody's calendar just to bring them here today. When there's no will to govern, the rules set out in our legislation, our statute will determine. So that's the Wills, Estates, Succession Act. It's new in 2014. A lot of people still think we have the old statutes. But with this, I get a lot of comments when I'm out and listening to friends at parties and things like that. They say, well, if you die, the government decides what to do with your assets. No, not really. The government has already decided what to do with everybody's assets. So there is a distributive position that the government has set out for us. But it doesn't mean that when you die, if you have no will, somebody's going to call John Morgan and say, okay, well, what did you think about Susan? Like, should it go to the government or should it go to the charities? It's all the same for everybody. So I can tell you exactly what's going to happen to your assets if you die without a will. Somebody will apply to the court to administer your estate. We also hear, and then they decide who's going to handle your assets. Well, they do because you didn't. So maybe the kids will argue about it. Maybe the kids will apply together. Maybe a friend. Maybe a creditor. I've certainly had estates where a law firm has called and said a client with an injury file and all of these costs and expenses has now passed away, and they had no other assets other than their claim against the driver that injured them. How do we go about this? And I said, well, if there's no family and there's no assets, or if there's family but they don't want to administer an otherwise defunct estate, then a creditor can apply. And so that's something that we do see happen occasionally. So if you have a spouse and no children, it goes everything to the spouse. This is the government's plan for you. If you have a spouse and children, and you're a nuclear family, all of your children belong to both of you, then the spouse will receive the first $300,000 of the estate, and then we split the rest between all of those parties. I tell my husband he needs a will because I need all of the money to raise these 3 children. I cannot take $300,000 of his assets and then split the rest with him and afford our lifestyle. I need his assets. If all of the deceased children are not also the children of the spouse, then the spouse receives the first 150,000. So this is a blended family acknowledgement in our modern statute that's only about 5.5 years old, that we have a lot of this coming up. So 50% of the residue of the estate will go to the spouse, and then 50% will be split equally between the children. So I cannot take 300 and then a split. It's just not manageable. So most people would say, yeah, that's same with me. A lot of people, though, pass away and everything's registered jointly, and so we don't see a lot of worry about finances on the death of the first spouse. And I should pause there and say something about that. I don't have a slide today about that, but when we're older, when we're in a nuclear family, or when we have a mutual will, my goal is that on the death of a first spouse, it's a legal non-event. Nobody should have to see anybody. You take your death certificate, you only need one. You take it and you file a Form 17 at the Land Title Office, and the property will be in your name solely. You take the death certificate to an asset holder, a financial planner or a bank, and the asset will be in your name only. When I say you only need one, I say that's because a notary or a lawyer can make you as many certified true copies as you want, and we don't charge $27 a copy the way the funeral homes do. I love funeral homes.
The funeral homes pay every dime to statistics.
Exactly, but the funeral homes don't benefit from it. But why should the family pay it in that case, right? So I'm not saying...
We love notaries all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got to get really clear on who needs the original. So a lot of times you're going to leave originals at the bank and send it to Service Canada and here, there, and everywhere. The only person that needs the original is the Land Title Office, the lawyer or notary that is transferring the asset to another. Well, first we transfer it to the executor, then we transfer. Nobody else needs an original. And then the will. Don't take the will to anybody. The original will doesn't need to go anywhere except the probate registry. So a bank doesn't need original will. Your investment planner doesn't need the original will. Nobody needs the original will. Even CRA. Get your certified true copies made as inexpensively as possible and protect your original documents so that they can go where they need to go. But don't be paying extra for them unless you feel like, I need to do this right away and I'm here. And that's a really good reason to get extras on the day. Sometimes people will want a death certificate for each child, each person who's close. That actually is a really good idea because later sometimes we say, well, I don't know this or I don't have this document. An original people do take care of better than a certified true copy, so that might be a really good reason to take extras. But in any event, when the first spouse dies, it should be a non-issue. It should be about you and your family and not about the bank and the accountant and the financial planner and certainly not the lawyer. Spouse and children. The spouse will receive all the household items, and then the spouse has an option to purchase the home. So this is what happens when we're on intestacy, jumping back to that. So we have the split of the value of the assets, but then we have, what about the very specific assets? How are they entitled to flow? But if we don't have a spouse and children, then it goes to the parents or the surviving parent, if we have one. Then to the descendants of the parents, so the children. So, for instance, if I passed away without a will, then my biological father, even though he didn't raise me, would be entitled. And if he wasn't there, then my half-brother would. So really interesting choices there from the government as far as some people are concerned, but very logical, natural choices for a nuclear family. Grandparents are their descendants, great-grandparents are their descendants, and then after we get to, it's like that old 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon game, but we're going to the fourth or lesser degree of relationship, then yes, it would sheet to the crown, as we say, it would transfer to the government. This is very rare. You have to be the last man standing in your entire family history, virtually, to not meet one of these types of other dispositive events. And there's the chart. Don't look at that too hard. It's really unpleasant, right? But I put that up there because I think that the answer to the question, what happens if we die without a will, is really simple. But if you see that, you're going to think, oh, this is really complicated, I don't even know. So there's a lot of stuff about estate planning, taxes, asset flow that sounds really complicated or looks really complicated. You guys are all able to understand all of this. You can make the best decisions, but you just need the information that's applicable to your circumstances. The only reason I ever put this slide up is an example of don't think that there's so much magic in an accountant or a lawyer's education or brain that you can't deal with it. It's all a lot more simple than that right there, right? So anyway, that's it.
Okay, so there's a lot to be taken into with the wills and estate planning, especially for those who may think that they don't have anything. I'm going to tell you the story of a best friend who has passed on, and the executor of this estate, after the bank did some digging, not necessarily the executor of the estate, the bank did some digging. They found an account that held a what could be deemed as a sizable amount of money, and what was to be done with it. And the person in question died, I'm not going to say necessarily in squalor, but they died surviving on a disability check. They had if they did have a clue that it was there, it wasn't, the funds were not truly available to them. So the estate as it stands, while the provincial government paid for final expenses and her apartment, the last month's rent went unpaid, and a few other things financially are left open-ended. There are bills to be paid. There was no, outside of this sizable account that was eventually found by a banker, there was no accessible funds to pay off final bills. So you don't know what could eventually appear that you could actually own. So gratefully, there was a will written that kind of described how things were supposed to go and what was supposed to happen with the state of the body, what was supposed to happen with certain belongings and things like that. Thank God there was a will. So a lot of things did get taken care of, and yet this account did appear, which was outside of the will. So careful will planning, and even if you are on a disability check, you might be able to find a lawyer that will just help you, walk you through this final document. And I would advise you get it done so that there are no questions for loved ones in the end. We all need to have things taken care of because we're going to leave stuff behind. We just can't take it with us. So, with that being said, thank you again for listening. Thank you, Surrey Hospice, for inviting us in. Thank you, Surrey Hospice, for actually starting this conversation. And please do reach out to Surrey Hospice. Just Google Surrey Hospice, right, and be surprised at the number of things that they have to help us actually live better and live until the actual end does actually come. All right. Thank you again, and we will talk to you later. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.